Hello, everyone, and welcome to I think it's the 32nd episode of Back Alley Chat. We're beginning to lose count, which you know what is a pretty good thing because that means that we keep making new ones. I am your host, Allie Severino, and by the way, Back Alley Chat is the fastest growing addiction recovery podcast in the world, allegedly, in my opinion. So today we have a super interesting guest, Doug L. And when I mean interesting, well, keep listening and you'll find out. Doug got sober in 97 and throughout his recovery ended up having to go to prison for a decade. One of the worst prisons in the state of Florida. And so we're going to learn some of the lessons that he learned through that experience and some things that he brought home with him. I'm really excited. He has a lot of talents, and he's a very interesting person. So I think you guys are going to love this episode. Of course, this episode wouldn't even be possible without our sponsor, Quick Intel. Quick Intel has a hub of AI security and safety tools that allow you to invest like a pro. No more getting scammed or not knowing where your money's going. Use Quick Intel today to make sure that your investments are safe. You can go to quickintel.io or you can download their app on your Android or iOS today. Always show them some love because they are so good to us. I love you guys so much. That was a quick and easy intro. Hey, Doug.
Hi, how's it going?
Good. Thanks for coming to hang. Hey, first of all, congrats on getting off probation.
We call it parole for state.
Ah, right.
So the county is probation, and the state is parole.
How long were you on parole for? I guess
5 years after doing 10.
Because I think we met about 5 years ago.
I started coming out to socially after about 6 months of being home.
Wow.
So, and going back to places I already frequented. Like I knew everybody that you knew, but you didn't know me because I was gone.
Right, for so long.
Yeah, so.
So are you from Florida, Doug?
No, I'm from Germantown, Maryland.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm an Appalachian shithead, boy. I can say that on the pod.
You look like one. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, for sure. With my El Kabong t-shirt. You don't even know what this is.
I don't know.
This is from Quick Drama Draw.
That looks like a very old cartoon.
Yogi.
Okay.
It's one of his friends.
Totally.
Yeah, so it's a retro shirt my son
So
got.
my dad will know.
For sure.
So when did you come down to Florida, Doug?
So I came down on the Coast Guard.
Oh, okay.
I flew in to Key West, Florida. I was on a drug enforcement team, and they sent me by myself to catch one of the boats that was going down. Exciting times, like 1986.
Oh, so fun.
Right, Panama, Miami Vice, and I have never really left the state. And so I landed in Key West and thought I was in Jamaica. And literally went up to the ladies at the airport, because they dropped me off and left at a private airport, military airport. And I literally said, I think I'm in the wrong country. And they laughed at me, and I literally walked down the streets in 1986 in Key West and said, I'm never coming home.
Wow.
I did not know this existed.
The Keys are the best.
It was beautiful. So I picked FAU to go to college
Okay.
on a scholarship where on the map in the VA, they had cut out Key West and moved it up to the side of Boca Raton because it didn't fit. It was elongated.
Oh.
And I looked at the map and went, I've been to Key West, and that's right next to Key West, so I'll go to school in Boca. And I thought Boca Raton was next to Key West. I walked out to the beach.
A couple hours away.
Yeah, and I'm going to school on a scholarship. So obviously they wasted their money on me.
What did you go to school for?
I went to come to FAU for the environmental science bachelor's to save the Everglades. It was the first 4-year degree ever.
Cool.
In a time period where climate control or climate change was being challenged. And then when I got there, they defunded the program, so I took C++ computer programming with a minor in real estate finance, which led me to my career.
Yeah, totally. You really used that in your life.
Well, I wanted to hang on to the school thing because there was a bar on campus. FAU is one of the only colleges that had the Rathskeller. The Rathskeller was a bar.
There was a bar? They must not be there anymore.
Oh, they're there.
Really?
Yeah, they have like a student pizza, pool, darts, and beer. And when I was doing the orientation, I reviewed it.
Sold.
Yeah, I went to Harvard. They didn't have a bar on campus. Like I reviewed at a couple of schools that were really highbrow. And I came down here and was like, oh my God, there's a bar on campus. So when they were doing orientation, I slipped off, stood in the back, and let them circle the campus and did a couple pictures. When they came back, I got back in line. It was like, I'm going to stay here.
Now, what year was that?
1989.
Okay.
I'm 56. So.
That's the year I was born.
Yeah, so this town was not,
Nothing like
where
it
we are
is.
now in South Florida, it wasn't as developed.
Right,
So
totally.
It didn't go past, like 5 miles away from the beach. And so I got into college. I had drank too much. I started doing painting of houses. And flourished because there were so many people moving down here, building. The place was, you know, Las Vegas in the early 90s type thing. You just couldn't go wrong.
Yeah, booming.
Booming.
Everyone loves South Florida.
Yeah, and so I did too. And so I ended up just being drunk and painting.
Right, because you got sober in 97.
Yeah, so
it's less than 10 years after college.
Yeah, so 86, 87, 88, I'm in the Coast Guard. 89, I came into some money. My friends were in music, and they hit it big. And so, not related to this podcast, but I was in a group of guys that did really well. So when I came back from the Coast Guard, they had sold music that we had made in high school, and I had a royalty. So I came down here with money enough to stay drunk for a couple of years. And then no planning, like money under the bed type thing. When it ran out, I was like, oh. And one of my friends said, hey, if you're going to pick a career, the tool that you open a paint can with, the other side's a bottle opener. Only trade where they hand it to the drunk so they won't lose it. So a paint can opener is also a bottle opener.
So you decided that's for me.
That was it. That was like, hey, they get me. And so I went down to the local Sherwin-Williams and opened an account. And the guy there, ironically, I had met previously when I was running around with my buddies from school. And he had moved down from South Carolina and got me an account and gave me a couple hotels to paint, like second week on the job. Didn't know what I was doing. And they literally had to tell me the price. And
painting's like the worst.
Well, not only that.
Do you enjoy it?
I enjoyed the money.
Yeah. But did you enjoy like actually painting things?
Well, I contemplated being drunk with a saw in my hand. And
better
I thought
a paintbrush.
Yeah, I didn't know what pressure cleaners were. I didn't know that they were machinery that you could paint with. I didn't know any of that. It was like roller, brush. And then, you know, I didn't know houses were 5,000 square feet down here. Right? Because they're country clubs where they just build these mansions. And so I teamed up with a couple of general contractors that needed somebody to basically take on assignments that could be planned. And that's when you're doing 100 houses at a time. And so that I was responsible for hiring the painters and then employing them and paying them and getting the quality control under management. And that led to tile, because you're doing the paintings, you might as well do the tile. And you do the tile, might as well do the bathrooms. You're doing the bathrooms, you might as well do the kitchens.
Right.
And I found myself, you know, let's just say in a few years' time, taking on a lot more responsibility than I initially probably was qualified for.
Right.
I sold. And then I had to go produce.
Yeah, right.
And so in doing that, I hired a general contractor to qualify my company, and he got addicted to oxys.
Oh, no.
And I didn't know what oxys were, right, because I was the drunk guy. So in 97, I get sober.
How did that come about? So you don't have to go into, like, the whole
No, it's easy.
history,
I was just sick of getting arrested for driving without a license.
Really?
Like 40 times in Broward.
Oh, my God.
Yeah,
Doug.
Yeah.
How did you even still allowed to drive? Are you allowed to drive now?
I have a safe driver's license. I got to like, pull it up and hold it up because I never had a license.
Oh. So does
said,
it count if you've never
had
had
I never had a license. So when I went and got it reinstated.
Life hack.
Yeah. So after $50,000 in reinstatement fees, $1,500 per charge.
Wow.
And so this leads to a quick funny story. So the reason why I got licensed is first I quit drinking. So that's not sober, right? That's abstinence. I didn't know that.
Right.
And then a few months later, the 2 days after I quit drinking, my business partner and my fiance, I catch them in the sack.
Stop it.
Now, he's my next door neighbor. We live on the Intercoastal in a house next to each other, and I'm dating a pretty girl. She's like Miss Pittsburgh 1990 or something.
Miss Pittsburgh.
Yeah, well, she was a ball girl for the Pittsburgh Pirates, right? So all the nuts roll down to Florida, by the way. So I'm dating somebody that I guess for like a year they were having an affair, but I didn't know because I was drunk.
Wow.
Right? So they would just go out, and I would just be like, oh, they're out, you know? And I didn't connect the dots they were out together until I sobered up.
Yeah, and then you're seeing everything.
And then I'm like, oh, I knock on the door of the mom's condo, and they're there. And she's like, what are you doing here? I'm like, I could ask the same question, but it doesn't really matter. And so, you know, I went out to help take the mother's pets out because mom was out of town. And my girlfriend and my business partner's cars are parked there. And I'm like, whoa. And I'm like, newly quit drinking. And I'm like, oh,
so you're a psychotic person.
Yeah, I'm like, I could hurt the guy who lives next to me. And then I find out they had called the police and said, if we go missing, we're cheating on this guy. But I didn't find out that until one of my buddies stopped by. He was a police officer, and he was like, hey, they contacted us like a month ago. I'm like, whoa. Like, I'm not that stupid. So I realized, hey, if you guys can have each other, because now I'm not drunk.
Right.
So obviously I was making bad choices and hanging out with bad people, and I wasn't taking care of myself. This was an eye-opening experience. And that's when I met my wife. Like 90 days later, I met somebody really cool.
And she seems like a great woman.
She's super cool. Right? And so she set rules for me when she met me, like, hey, what do you mean you don't have a driver's license? I'm like, well, I was so dysfunctional that I actually bought a car in Titusville that was $500. It was a Plymouth Reliant.
Those were the days.
Right? I drove to Titus to get a car that was $500 because it was the same car as 3 driveways down. So I could steal the tag and put it on my car. And that's what I did. I went and took the next door neighbor's tag, put it on my car, and that was my idea of having a car. So if I got pulled over, the tags would be for the same car. I'd say,
why not just get a license?
That doesn't factor in. First off, try that with 40 driving while suspended. I showed up to the DMV. They laughed at me. They're like, get out of here. So then I hired an attorney who said, listen, go to hearings. Because the way the law used to be, if you didn't show up to court, they just kept your bond. They didn't arrest you.
Right.
This is because tourists would come down here, get a DUI, and they didn't want people thinking that Florida was going to chase up to, like, New York or DC or Philly and then pull you back down. So it became an outstanding bench warrant. And I would just pay the $1,000 to get out because it was cheaper than paying the $1,500 to reinstate the license. That was thinking, right? And so Hillary said, I'm not going to marry somebody. She's pregnant. She's like, I'm not going to marry you. You don't have a driver's license. I'm like, well, when are we going to bring that up? Like, wait, that wasn't part of the deal. So I went to each hearing, and then I talked to the judge, say, sorry, I was immature. And they're like, okay, well, just, pay your fee and good luck. And this was over and over and over again. Multiple hearings. And then the last one was in Naples, Florida. Back in 1989, I got pulled over and I got a non-driving offense for driving without a license. I wasn't driving. So I was parked in a car.
Oh.
I had, I think, a quarter pound of weed in the trunk.
Oh, man.
And they pulled up and they're like, what are you doing? I was smoking a joint in the car with the sunroof open on Thanksgiving Day. And they arrested me. And then they took me back to my girlfriend's grandparents' house and dropped me off for Thanksgiving.
That's nice.
But the girlfriend didn't tell the parents that I had been arrested. So.
Well, yeah.
So that was an ex-girlfriend right off the bat. So, and this is how my life went, right? And when I went to the last hearing to get my driver's license, I'm in Naples. And I'm thinking, this all went easy in Broward and went easy in Palm Beach. I go in front of the judge in Naples. And he's like, I'm going to give you 5 years. I'm like,
what?
whoa.
Wow.
He's like, you're not getting off here with, he's like, you got arrested 3 times in May. I'm like, well, it was a bad month. You get it, right? He's like, no, I don't get this. And then I'd been not drinking for I'm going to phrase that instead of sober. I've been not drinking for 8 months, maybe 10 months for this all to occur. And I said, well, that's old. And he takes my driving record on his pulpit, on his desk. He throws it up in the air and it lands on the floor with a thud. And he starts reading each page, like a 55-page driving record. And he goes, you give me one reason why I should not put you away for 5 years. And my now wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, jumps up and she's got the belly and goes, if you think I'm going to raise this by myself. And he turned to me and he goes, I said, I'll take the 5. He goes, he goes, nope. He goes, you go be a good dad. And he cut me a break.
Wow.
Which was super cool. That just doesn't happen.
Yeah,
right?
Totally.
It didn't make a difference.
Right. Well, because you end up going anyway.
For 10 years. I got,
wow.
Right? If I had taken
probably should have just taken the 5.
I was going to say, in retrospect, just in this conversation, it was a really good deal. It wasn't meant to be. So I did not go through AA. And the reason why is I didn't like the first meeting I went to.
Really? What was it like?
I got there early. Like I got here early today. And the guys assembled and talked about drinking before the AA guys showed up. And when they introduce you, at least in this group setting, they were like, okay, this is a new guy, Doug. Tell us about yourself. And I really had no script. I didn't know you're supposed to say, I'm Doug and I'm an alcoholic and any of that. Right. I was like, I'm Doug. And they're like, what do you do? And I'm like, well, I own a construction company. And 5 guys are like, are you hiring? Right away. And I'm like, I just watched you say that you were drinking and gave the reasons before the sponsor showed up, or the person having the meeting. And so that turned me off. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go back to my martial arts. Serendipity, I went to prison with martial arts, not sobriety.
Wow.
So it saved my life. But what happened was, instead of dealing with whatever that ism is that causes you to not be like other people, if that's the right way to put it, because I think the isolation aspect is that I call it the ghost. And I've never heard anyone else call it that.
What do you call it that?
Because if I have a drink, there's a ghost that wakes up and takes control of the wheel, and I'm no longer in the front.
Right.
There's a Doug in the back that just wakes up and goes, "Oh, it's Heckle."
Good morning.
Yeah, let's go.
We're here.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's go steal a car.
Right.
You know, it's just something that's not normal.
Totally.
It's not even me, right?
Yeah.
It's these absurd ideas.
I can relate.
Okay, so I start working a lot. And the word workaholic never came in. Nobody stopped me and said, "Hey, you're doing the same thing that you were doing with something else." I had drank a case of beer a day for 15 years.
Right.
Not heavy drugs, not, I wasn't doing the other drugs that went along with that lifestyle. It was predictable. I could go drink beer, go pass out, and was like a happy drunk. So I wasn't the guy that was like getting fist fights or getting in trouble. Just like
driving without a license.
Well, that's for work. It wasn't while I was drinking. I never cut a DUI.
Well, that's good.
Right, there was no bus system set up here, and you couldn't run a construction company. I literally hired someone to drive me around before.
That's a good idea.
Instead of a license.
You could have just gave them $1,000 a week.
Well, I was figured, hey, this way we can go to the bar.
Right.
Right. It's like
that's a good point too.
And I could drink, and you could drive me around. But there was no time where it was like, okay, I'm going to join the system.
Right.
And from a young age, I wasn't in the system.
You're not going to conform.
Well, not only that, I don't think I knew how.
Yeah.
People when they move out when they're teenagers, I don't think they have that adult advice to go, okay, this is how you get back to ground zero. And you can go to school, you can work a job, but you don't have the life skills away from the decision making that goes along with being raised by somebody who can consult you, even if you don't like their advice. You may take it later, or you may compare it to the mistake that you made with not having the advice. So we fast forward working too much and assembling a bunch of work, and then finding in retrospect that my choice of qualifier was addicted to drugs. So now I've got this crisis because I've got 300 different sites going.
Wow.
Kitchens or bathrooms or room additions, or I'm remodeling grocery stores and hotels. And I find out that the guy that I've entrusted the supervision to the company, not only is he having problems with, which a lot of people were because they went to the doctor and they got diagnosed as having pain. They were issued,
of course,
back at this time period, we're talking like 1999, 2000, they were issued Oxycontins, right? So now you got somebody who's dealing with a drug issue that doesn't have to tell me because of HIPAA.
Right.
So he never told me. One of the guys saw him take pills in his console, and they went and looked in his console of his van and said, "Hey, we got a problem." They queued me. I went to the state. The state said, "Shut down your company right away. You cannot replace a qualifier," because he's the one who qualifies the company, the incorporation, and I am an employee of that company. That's how that works.
Wow.
So if you're a dentist,
so you can't replace him.
I can't replace him. He can replace me.
Right.
So I have to shut the company down, and overnight.
And all these projects.
Right. So what I did was I went and finished all those projects because ethically I was like, I'm not leaving these people hanging. I'm not leaving these without a bathroom.
Right.
And the way that we had set up construction, it was just 10% draws. So I was always showing up and doing a certain amount of work and getting paid after I did it. But halfway through a job, how are you going to get a contractor to show up if your bathroom's gutted and know what you're putting in, where the permit is, all the stuff that goes along with, especially if you're in a condo, all the stuff that goes along with the administrative work of doing a construction job. So I showed up with another guy that got licensed while he was employed by us at the same company, and we finished all the jobs. That's illegal.
Oh, wow.
I didn't know that. You cannot shut a company down, declare bankruptcy, and then go back to those same jobs with another entity and do financial work, because that's a bait and switch.
Right.
So you're supposed to not touch anything related to those jobs. I'd never done it before. My intention.
I would think, hey, we're going to finish. I didn't leave you. I don't want all these people complaining. Yes, this was messed up, but I found a way to have a solution and complete this for you.
And at that point, I stepped outside of a legal arrangement that federal court's bankruptcy. So you can go out bankrupt because you don't have the money to finish jobs, right? And the argument was, I can't finish the jobs because I can't collect money because I'm no longer a licensed construction company. Wow. So instead of saying I can't pay my debts, which is one sort, this was explained to me, one sort of bankruptcy is, hey, I'm in debt and I can't pay my debts and I'm going to have to restructure. That's chapter 13, I think. The other one is, hey, we're dead. That's an 11. And that's the one I claimed because I wasn't going to legally be able to continue the permits because I wasn't the builder. Right. Let alone a driver's license, right? So then I went back and finished the jobs with another entity, and that triggered a bait and switch, or that allowed the state attorney to go, oh, you set this up.
Wow.
And all 300 jobs became felonies.
So you had 300 charges.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah, and I only got prosecuted on 10 because I fought every single one because ethically I didn't steal the money. But I didn't know the court system. I didn't know that all decisions in the court, for the most part, are discretionary by the judge.
Right.
And so the judge could say in the last 10 charges, hey, do not let the jury hear that you finished the job because it's confusing the jury. The same way I was confused. They weren't prosecuting me on counts because I finished the job. It was the right thing to do. But the law says it wasn't. So he did not let them hear the last 10, and I got 1 year for each of the 10 counts, basically.
Wow. So what
years.
was that day like when you walked out of court, like realizing?
I didn't walk out of court.
Oh, you
held
went right
me
into jail.
bond. Well, first off, when they arrested me, when they first arrested me.
Were you shocked?
I was dumbfounded.
Wow.
Because I'm a working guy and I'm a workaholic. Like I'm doing all this work. I'm not taking money. I've been in business locally for, literally like 10 years. And all of a sudden the accusation was, oh, we're going to come after you. Go get an attorney, right? So somebody calls me from the system and says, hey, my brother-in-law is a state attorney and they're coming after you. Oh, okay. So I speak to a criminal attorney. And he says, yeah, you just don't worry about it. Just when you get arrested, call me and give him my card and I'll just bond you out and then we'll deal with it. So I was like, okay. And then he calls me the next day after I used his business card, and I said, this is my attorney. He said to give it to you. And they're like, okay. And they post my bond on his card, I guess. And I guess he's like a important guy locally. And he calls me and goes, what the hell did you do? And I'm like, what? He's like, there's 300 counts. I'm like, what?
Oh, my God. Because
I was so dumbfounded. I was just signing papers and sitting there. Because I'd been arrested in the same county jail for driving without a license. I knew the officers.
Right.
And they weren't talking to me anymore. They're like, whoa. It used to be, hey, what's going on? When you get your license, how things are going. And that was like, whoa. And then I was out on bond and still operating the construction company I'd opened up and paying the bills. So the state attorney moved to have my bond revoked. And so I spent 2 years in county without a bond.
Wow.
Trying to get me to play.
Ugh,
I wouldn't do it.
Gross.
I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't play.
Terrible. Were you at a gun club?
I was at gun club and Broward. They moved me back and forth because I had jobs in both counties. But what was important was I learned the system.
Right.
Because I was in with guys that were coming back from violation of probation, or violation of parole. They'd been to state. My first county jail roommate had done 20 years in prison. I wrote him a motion and got him off, and he went home.
Wow.
Because I learned the legal system because I had a brain injury. I'd wrecked my car. Ironically, got a license, wrecked my car. And somebody cut me off and bumped into me, and I did a rollover 6 times. I got a brain injury. So the judge's thinking was, hey, you have a brain injury. We're going to bring you into county jail where we can watch you. And they revoked my bond.
Wow.
No warning. And so I'm in, and I start reading the Florida statutes for information to build my brain back up. And I learned them.
So you never got back out after going in?
No.
Did you get to say goodbye to your wife, or what was that? They just woke you up and brought you in?
I went into court, and they just took me. And so I stayed there for 2 years, and then I won the first 200 counts. I was acquitted.
Did you think you were going to go home?
I did for a year.
Yeah.
I still had this. They broke the case up into parts because it was too big to try it all at once.
Right.
And the first 100 counts, I think, I was acquitted on, and I was acquitted on the motion that I wrote.
Wow.
And it was the first time that a pro se motion filed in conjunction with an attorney that this judge, who was a hanging judge, said, I've never done this, and I'm doing it now, and you're acquitted. And I went home, and the state attorney went back to another judge that had turned my case down as a federal prosecutor. That's why I went to state. He said it's not a crime. He was appointed as a judge and then took the case back over and then prosecuted me. And he's the one that pulled me back in and said, okay, you can't have the jury hear that you finished these jobs.
So what was your first day at Martin CI like when you got there?
So Martin wasn't my first day. So I initially went to Dade CI.
Oh,
so
God.
I'm in, and I'm a big guy. I'm 6'4", 50. I'm not your average guy that's going to be like, oh, what's going to happen? I was really scared. I was like, oh my God, this is really happening. Shit. And I'm white,
right?
And I'm middle-aged, and I'm all over the news locally as a CEO. So these guys all think I'm like their Madoff.
Right.
They don't know that I actually didn't steal the money. So they really want lessons from Al Capone. I don't have any, but I'm not going to tell them that. So I'm like, okay. Maybe I can play this role.
Right.
And I get to Dade, and they drop you off on a bus, and the guys are all high-fiving each other on the bus. Hey, man, we're here. And they've got music playing, reggae music playing on the yard. There are drug bags on the floor as you're walking into the building, and they assemble you in this little room with, I want to say it's like 30 or 40 of us that were coming from Broward County and Dade CI, right?
Wow.
I mean, Dade County. So Dade CI is the local place to drop you off. And then you've already been processed in the state prison system. And if you're lucky enough to get a local place to go to, then your family could visit.
Right.
So that's why the guys are all happy, because they're staying next to their family. And they assemble us in a room and they say, okay, here's the rules. There's more drugs here than on the outside.
That's a rule?
That's a rule. Let's get used to that. And I was like, whoa. They're like, there's going to be gang fights. There's going to be stabbings. There's going to just, and they're like, we don't care if you know anybody, grab the guy next to you and start walking next to him. Like it was like 30 seconds of how to do time. And then they let you out. And I'm like, oh. And there was a wedding immediately after I got settled in on the softball court. So I attended a wedding of 2 guys getting married on the mound.
2 guys getting married?
Yeah, because of prison, right? And they're like throwing up paper in the air. Like, it was really amazing how much work went into it. Was catered.
Making like a really nice wedding
like
for them.
Afterwards,
Wow.
there was like, they had like burritos on the table and everybody went and it was catered. It was like, I was like, wow. And then I don't know, like half an hour later, a guy passed out in the commissary line doing K2.
Oh, wow.
And they literally in front of me. So we're in line. The guy's like, bam, and he falls down on the concrete. And they wake him up and go, where'd you get it? They want to buy it. Like that when they saw this guy, he's got foam coming out of his mouth. And they're waking him up.
They're like, where's
this at?
Right.
So I'm like, whoa. And I come back to my bunk. I'm in an open dorm. And I come back to my bunk. And the guy next to me says, do you have mental health meds? And I'm like, well, yeah, they're giving me stuff for my brain injury. And he's like, okay. And he takes Lexapro, which is called chain gang cocaine. Puts it on his locker and then crunches it up and does like 3 big lines and goes, give you $10 and walks away. And this guy's next to me. He's in the bunk next to me. And then like, whoa.
I like the chain gang cocaine.
Whoa. That's what they call it. Chain gang cocaine.
Wow.
And so I didn't know any of this. So the first thing I'm like, I go see the doctor the next day. She's like, hey, what medicine were you on the outside? Lexapro. Right away.
Learn very fast.
That's
good.
Lexapro, right? Give that to the guy next to me to keep him away from me. I don't need the $10. Have fun. And then they have fighting on the yard for money, and they found out that I was a martial artist. And so right away, I was like, yeah, how much do you guys pay? And they're like, we bet $100 a fight. I'm like, give me 3. Because I'm going to try to pay Hillary and the kids. My thinking was so flawed that I'm like, I'm going to earn money from it here. And so I went and did 3 fights on the yard the next day and won. And they brought me bags of honey buns. And they like filled my bag full of honey buns and soups. I'm like, what is this? They're like, this is chain gang money. And I'm like, no.
Wait, how the fuck do I convert this to cash, bro?
Right. Like, can I turn it back in?
Is there like a window to go to?
Like, I'm not going
foreign
to
exchange currency.
I risked my life.
For honey buns.
For honey buns, right? Whoa. And then the next day the warden called me in and said, hey, we hear you like to fight. And I was like, well, yeah, I'm going to be candid. He's like, do you like milk? I'm like, yeah. He's like, you want it to come out in 7 holes in your stomach? And I'm like, he goes, they're going to stab you tomorrow. Not only that, he knows it because there's narcs in the system that get paid for telling these guys what's going to happen. And if they care, they stop it. And if they don't care, they don't.
Wow.
And then he's like, I'm going to send you to Martin CI. And I'm like, oh, Martin County, that's right above Palm Beach County. I'll be even closer to home. And I called my wife and said, I'm going to Martin. And she goes, let me look it up. We're brand new in the system. And the phone went silent.
Let me look it up.
Right? And she was like, honey. And it turns out to be one of the most dangerous prisons in the country, not just Florida.
Wow.
And it's a level 7 psych prison where most of the people, not all, most of the people are there because the prison system in Florida has sent them there.
Oh, wow.
And they're, the first guy I met there was super cool, super nice to me. First day on the yard, by myself, I go out to sit away from everybody else and meditate. And a guy walks up to me, his name is Mike. Hey, hi, Mike. I'm like, this guy walked right up to me. Some of these guys know me from doing 2 years in county from here. So most of the guys know that you don't walk up to a big guy that studies martial arts his whole life, maybe. Right? Some guys don't use it really well. But I in 2 years in county, I pretty much earned my reputation of being somebody that's probably not going to back down. Mm-hmm. And this guy sat, he's your size, came up, sat right next to me. I'm like, whoa. He says, what are you here for? And I'm like, you're not supposed to ask that. And I go, I'm here for, money and fraud. I'm like, what are you here for? And he goes, I killed my family.
Oh my God.
Whoa. And then he goes on to tell me I dressed up in a dress and combat boots on Christmas and shot him.
What?
And I'm like, I'm as far away from anybody else on the yard, and this guy's 2 feet away from me, and my shit's scared. I'm like, whoa. And then later, walking back in, a guy walks up to me and goes, yeah, I heard you were talking to Michelle. I'm like, he said his name was Michael. I'm like, well, it's Michelle. And later I learned that he was absolutely Michelle on the compound, and he would beat up really big guys.
Wow.
He would walk up to him and just like pick a fight with him. And luckily with me, we got along. It
Yeah.
was weird. I guess it was the demeanor in which I was so afraid. I don't know. 'Cause I didn't know that,
Is there air conditioning there?
None.
What? How is that possible? Why is there no air conditioners
This
in
is
the
a
prison?
punishment setting that you haven't heard about yet. And we're here to talk about that, right? So
That's fucking crazy.
So I went from 260 pounds, which is what I am right now. Big, robust, fat-looking dude.
Sure. Sure.
I'm not cut at all, right? I love pizza. And I go in, especially when, this was something that took years to happen, right? So I'd spent years paying for defense and working, and it was until that's why they revoked my I was arrested in 2004. I didn't go to prison until 2010. So I dragged these guys by defending myself and having depositions and doing the whole protocol because of the number of counts. So I'm actually I got charged when I was like 33, and now I'm 41 going to prison. And then I think I mentioned before, my first roommate, I'm trying to act macho, like I'm in prison and I'm going to make this happen. And the first guy that I'm in prison with, my roommate has heard that I do legal work, like I send people home from county writing motions, and he hands me his casework. Abraham Rivera, very nice guy, very Christian, cut somebody's head off and their arms and their legs off when he was younger, made a mistake. And I'm reading his legal work, and my hands are trembling. I'm like, oh my God. He's like, you can help me? Yeah, I better. They're going to shut that door, and I live here, right? And so,
what did he want help with?
Going home. It turns out that his brother and him were both charged. He took the charge because they told him it was 25 years to life. He didn't speak English. He didn't have a translator, and his brother had a wife and kids. So he said, 25 years, I'll take it. When he went up for parole, they said, we'll see you in another 40 years. And he had never had a translator. They didn't give him an English to Spanish translator so he could understand that he had admitted to something, according to him, he didn't do.
Right.
I'm not here to judge. I don't know what people did or didn't do, but he didn't have a translator, and he has a constitutional right to know what he's admitting to.
Right.
And so I wrote a motion and got him back. I don't know what the outcome is right now.
Do you decapitate any more people?
That's the question, right? But that's am I doing the right thing, right? Because I'm here and claiming innocence, and so I have to back up. In county jail, I stopped being a victim in my third day. I was a complete crybaby. I was calling home every 10 minutes, and oh my God, how's this happening to me? This isn't fair. I didn't do it. Why won't the world listen? And there was an older gentleman that had a broom that was called the houseman. He takes care of the room, and there's a total respect that he's going to keep the floors clean and empty the trash and keep the showers clean. And everybody kind of gives him license to do whatever he wants. So he's off limits. I became the houseman later because of this guy. And he walked up to me while I was telling everybody in the room, I'm not guilty. And I'm on, I'm on the TV, and they're talking about I'm in local celebrity business guys in jail. And he walked up and he goes, did you ever do something that you should have been prosecuted for? And I said, yeah, a ton of stuff. And he goes, then you're supposed to be here.
Oh, man.
That was it. I was like, you're right. Because if I'd done something and gotten away with it, did it really matter if I did this? Right. And that was the ego leveling for me. I was like, oh, still hadn't been to AA.
Right.
Fast forward 5 years later, 6 years later, I meet two civilians that come in to volunteer their time that were ex-inmates to provide AA services.
Oh, wow.
And I walked into the meeting to bless them and tell them I really appreciate their time, that they come in, and more people should come to the meeting. There was nobody there. And one guy said, well, when did you quit? And I said, 1997, Wednesday, June 3rd. And he goes, and when did you come to prison? I'm like, oh, I didn't come to prison until 2009. He's like, I would shoot myself in the face.
Oh my God. Rude.
I was like, what? He's like, if I came to prison sober, he's like, you're not sober. And I was like, I haven't had a drink. Because that doesn't mean you're not. That's not being sober. And that's when the epiphany happened. I was like, oh, I'm supposed to do work on myself.
Right.
I just had all this time and I wasn't doing that.
Right.
And that was the game changer.
Wow.
And AA in prison is off the chain.
Is it fun?
Oh my God. So
way better.
I'm in a meeting with a guy. Later on, so I went around the room and I forcibly made guys come to AA because I did their legal work. So I knew whether they were on drugs or alcohol at the time of their crime. Right. So I went kind of recruiting the next week and bringing people in. And after that went on for like a month, it got more popular on the compound for people to come in. The stigma was lifted a little bit, at least short term.
Right.
And one guy came in the room in the back, was silent. And I picked up on the fact that because you start to notice everything when you're in. Like you notice everybody's personality and whether somebody's upset or triggered or they're about to go off. And there's a guy in the back that was agitated. So when everybody else left the room, I stayed with these two civilians just to make sure that, this guy wasn't going to like shank him or something.
Right.
And he walked up and said, "I forgive you." And he left the room and the civilian was bleach white. He's like, and I'm like, "What's going on?" He goes, "I shot that guy in the face 8 years ago at a drug deal."
What?
I was like, what? He's like, yeah. He's like, it was in Palm Beach and everything went wrong. And he was like, I just pulled out and shot. And the guy walked up and forgave him.
Wow.
And that's sobriety.
Wow.
That's like top notch. Like, woo.
That's crazy.
And that, the guys were talking about hooking up pickup trucks to ATMs and yanking them out of the wall for the money, right? Out of the buildings. But they would do it like 3 or 4 times in a row. So they'd have them piled up, driving around town. With like 4 ATMs.
I bought an ATM safe from somebody. I don't know where it came from. I was like, this is great. It still had like the money thing in the top.
But
and
they yank them.
I was like, yeah, this is great. I'll buy it.
But
How cool is that?
They weren't yanking one and running and hiding. They're like, hey, let's go get 4 or 5.
Right. Might as well.
Yeah. Bring them,
do it right.
So my license wasn't a big deal when you think about people driving around with 5 ATMs in the back of the truck.
So okay, you got to tell me more about this no air conditioning thing, Doug.
Right, so
I can't imagine being in a Florida prison in August with a bunch of disgusting, smelly men. And how do they hire people to work in that environment? There must be no.
Look at the locations.
Where is it? Florida.
Look at all the locations. They're in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
The only job in town.
Oh.
Lake Butler had an article in the newspaper written by a teacher who was going to quit because he couldn't get people to pass 6th grade because they already knew they were going to be a DOC officer.
What?
So they would quit. They wouldn't even go to junior high because they don't need it.
But Martin CI, looks like those COs get arrested just as much as the inmates.
The
it looks like they are very corrupt.
Yeah, you have to figure out how to allocate your time for how much the topic is because
I know, we have so much to talk about.
I would hire police officers. I would pay them to bring cell phones onto the compound to distribute it because I issued the battery chargers for the cell phone. So I wouldn't have clients that could then pay me for the charging of the batteries. And I wasn't alone. I had met guys that already had infrastructure that could actually communicate because you had these different groups inside the system that I taught martial arts.
Right.
So I had one person from each of those groups that joined the dojo. And then they would go back with assignments and they had networks of hundreds of people that were related to the guards, right? Like there were guards at work release that they had to take because they were taking the income that the inmates make and keeping it.
Wow.
They don't get arrested, they get reassigned.
Right.
They don't want that to get out. So, there's a level at each place where you have people that, at some point you're going to have guards that have compassion for the inmates. And the inmates look for that.
Right.
They're looking for that. In the news a couple of years ago, there was somebody that helped someone escape, right?
Right.
Not in Florida, but somewhere else. And that's because they're human. And so they're going to be people that are in a system that maybe aren't guilty or are just hit it off with a guard, right? That's going to happen. You got male and female guards working together.
Sure.
People are going to get along at some point.
Oh yeah.
Right? And so they have that level, and then you have people that are related to the inmates.
Right.
And so there's a different viewpoint of how to help out family in the system, and that's the drugs that come in, and that's the phones that come in, and or maybe turning the other way when it comes to like inspections where you find stuff.
Have you ever watched a female or was it woman sheriffs of Broward County?
I haven't to avoid PTSD. Like,
I understand.
It's like Orange is the New Black. That's off the table.
Doug, I started watching this show. I've seen them fucking flashbang somebody's house over a roach. I was like, holy shit, I cannot believe they're allowed to do that.
We'll take a step back.
This was in 2009 when it was filmed, but I'm just like seeing these people they're arresting and what they're like.
In county jail.
And you feel bad. I might be like, I feel bad for you too if I was.
You're human. You're going to find situations where you have compassion. But there's also, like at Martin, there's so heinous crimes.
Right.
That there's this level of what is an acceptable murder and what's not acceptable, right? This is a dialogue we have every day at the lunchroom.
Right.
And so some guy may have killed somebody and people understand why he did it, and then somebody else can say, okay, I killed somebody, and people go, that's the wrong reason. And so there's this, there's friction at the charge level. But as far as the air conditioning goes, we stay grounded on the air conditioning.
Yeah, tell me.
There's big fans that are up in the building that extract air from the room.
Oh, that's good.
And then there's windows that have they're metal plates, and they have like 15 holes drilled in them. And the air gets sucked into the windows, if you're lucky. And then there's a hole in each room that lets the air go up. And so that's when we smoke, we blow the air into those holes, and it extracts it out of the building.
Wow.
So that's how we can smoke. We take toilet paper and we twist it up tightly so it's a fuse, so you light it with a spark battery with a tinfoil, and it stays lit all day. So you can go back up and hit the toilet paper twine, or maybe half the day, depending on if you have soap to wax the line so it burns slower, right? And then marijuana, heroin, cocaine, methamphetamines, mollies, all of these are brought in during visitation, right? And they're handed off from people in visitation to the, it's not always visitation, but that's a popular way for people to get access to recreational drugs. And then we used to make a lot of wine. I hired the swill billies. Now, swill is when you take the food that you're not going to eat and you put it into the trash can. In prison, that's a lot of trays because the food's not really good. So you literally have like hundreds of pounds of meat going out every day, and the local pig farmers can pick it up. So it's stored in 50-gallon drums.
They feed the pigs the same food they feed you guys.
Because they don't want to throw it away, right? So these guys will take it for free. And then we would then we would take gloves and fill them full of sugar, and those are balloons, and we'd float them in the mix. And then I hired laundry to get the Aryans worked in the kitchen, in the trash department. The Jamaicans run the cooking. They're all groups, right? And they would have bigger boots on because one of the karate students was the laundry, and they would put the gloves in the end of their shoes, come home for lunch, dump them off. So we had the sugar. And we had our own factory in the dorm, and then we would make like 50 gallons of wine up in the little attics that we'd found that are above the shower storage. And we had a midget that would go in to a plate we took off. Not an actual midget, but a really small person. And we had them moved into the dorm because we needed them. We would take the toenail clippers and use them as screwdrivers and undo the screws, put the midget in the chute, and he would climb up the ladder. And there was this whole room up there that was to get to the roof. And then we would get to the roof at nighttime. We'd take lawn chairs up there from visitation. We would sit on the roof and smoke pot.
How'd you not get caught?
Because there's so much teamwork.
Right.
So when somebody's going to put the midget in the shower, then other inmates go to the desk of the officer, start asking for paperwork to fill out, to occupy him, so he doesn't notice that somebody's up there. And guys stand outside the shower like they're waiting in line and hold up a blanket so you can't see.
Everyone's working together. Everyone's working together. If we only could do that on the outside. How many people are in a dorm typically?
So they're butterfly dorms because they're shaped like the wings of a butterfly. There are 4 dorms. There should be 60 people in each dorm, so it's about 250 people in each building. Martin would have 7 buildings. So you have 1,600 people on what would be a college dorm. That's what it's set up like. You can actually walk around the facility, not like county jail. There's sidewalks, and you're going to walk, it might be on a 100-acre facility at Martin where you're going to walk what could be a third of a mile to get to work. Everybody has a job. So after breakfast, you can either go back and rest, and your job might be part-time, depending on whether you want a full-time job or not. No jobs pay money except for the commissary. So in Florida, there is in the Constitution that if you're a felon, you can be made to work for free. It's called indentured servitude.
Wow.
So you don't have to pay inmates. So when you see workers on the side of the road,
they're not getting paid.
They're not getting paid.
In the state of Florida, at least.
State of Florida.
How many COs would be in that group of 60?
1.
Wow.
250.
250.
You'd have one officer in the center that can look out to all 4. There are no cameras in the building. At least there weren't up until recently. I don't know if there are now. And that's why so much pops off in the Florida State Prison. They're not segregated by how much time. My first roommate, had life, and I was there for money. Right. I was a white-collar criminal.
Right.
And they didn't care. Like, they put you together based on your size. If they could put you with me size-wise, and I could be doing life, and you could be there for, like, a DUI.
Right. Wow.
They don't separate. Up until recently, they hadn't separated based on your charges. So that's why there's so many problems in the system. And then the officers can't stop something when it breaks off.
Hell no, I wouldn't stop it either. I'd be like, yeah, I got no backup and I want to go home later.
They call for backup.
Figure it out.
But backup then has to shut down the whole compound.
Wow.
Then all the officers have to run to the dorm to get together. I mean, there's enough time that whatever issue needs to transpire will transpire.
Oh my gosh.
And then you have yard hits because there's an officer in the tower. It's a hilarious story. I'm in Lake Butler. I think it's funny. I'm in Lake Butler, and they have never seen yoga. So when I'm doing a headstand or I'm doing like a wounded warrior, and I'm up, and they'd move me to a bunch of different camps and move me back because they just like, you're better fit at Martin. And I was closer to home, so I would literally do things to get sent back. And they walk up to me. I'm on the edge of a giant, like a 20-acre field. And when I started going away from the main people to go practice yoga for the silence and the peace, it looked like I was heading for the fence, right? Like, oh, this guy's lost his mind. He's going to go run for the fence. Even though I was nowhere near the fence. That was the only thing that was the direction I was going. And they sent 2 big guards out. And one big one and one small one. And they walk up to me they stopped at an uncomfortable distance. And I said, oh, the little one's the smart one. So I said, you're the smart one. And the big guy goes, are you a Hare Krishna? And I said, yes, I'm a Hare Christian. And the little one laughed. And he said, where are you from? And I said, I'm from West by God, West Virginia. He goes, holy shit. He goes, he's more redneck than us. And they started giving me free food at lunch because I was one of them.
Oh, right, that's cool.
Right. And the guy sitting next to me goes, aren't you from Maryland? I'm like, you need to shut up right now.
I was just going to say.
Don't bring that up. And they brought me a 13-year meditation they had in the closet from Baba Mukananda's Siddha Yoga for meditation, and said, this says yoga, but they ain't got no pictures. And it was 13,000 pages.
Oh, my gosh.
It was for people doing life that were doing a monthly program, and somebody either left it, right? Maybe they went home, and they gave me this huge amount of information on meditation. And here I had like 9 years to go or something crazy.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, I'm in. And so that was a game changer for me because I viewed doing the 10 years in retrospect as being a monk. Same clothes, same diet,
right?
No real job,
right?
And in time to meditate.
Yeah.
And the lesson I took was that's what people on the street are missing, is that every day you have to be on your bunk for count, right?
Right.
So you shut the whole compound down. They walk around. They verify each prisoner's where they're supposed to be. It takes 45 minutes. Then you do it at lunch. Then you do it at 4 o'clock. Then you do it at 6 o'clock. Then you do it at 8 o'clock. Then you do it at 10 o'clock. And these were the breaks that I needed to learn how to shut off the monkey mind or the maniac.
Right.
And I got to it. And I would have never gotten.
How did you, I mean, I guess it takes serious concentration to be able to do that in a prison like that.
I did it out of spite.
I mean, just being, it's like a jungle in there.
So one of the things I was able to do was one of my martial arts students was working at Martin and walked right up to me in the middle of the second day on there. He found out I was here. He walked up in the middle of the lunchroom and bowed to me, which is not cool.
Super not cool.
Sensei. And bowed, and everybody looked over, and I'm like, this is uncomfortable. Because I'm looking like a narc right now, real big time, right? I'm new here. And he says, the Sarge wants to see you. And I said, no. He says, what do you mean? I said, I am not going with you up to talk to somebody that's in control voluntarily. He's like, you're right, turn around and cuff up. And automatically the room's like, he got in trouble. And it was like, somebody in the lunchroom, they like popped the milk carton or something. And it gave me instant cred.
That's good.
And then I sat down in front of Sergeant Scarpetti, and he was known for killing inmates. That's what his reputation was. He had teeth in a jar on the table.
Wow.
And said, I heard you like to fight. And I said, so he'd already talked to the other warden. And then when they sent me, there was a note in the file saying this guy likes to fight. I hadn't gotten any fights on the yard. And I was doing it in private. Because guys are going to test you that, that karate don't work.
Right.
And I said, yeah, but I haven't here. And he goes, yes, you have 3 times. I said, how do you know that? He goes, people talk here. He said, it always gets back to me. He said, if you're going to do it on the yard. Now, martial arts is not allowed in Florida State. They don't let people practice. They don't let people at all because they don't want to be attacked by people. It makes sense, right? They took the weights out for the same reason.
Sure.
Because the inmates were getting jacked and they're jumping. The guards are not even in good shape, right? For the most part. And so he said, I'm going to let you do it on the yard. Okay. And so I was able to, if you fought me and I won, it cost you a bag of coffee. And if you fought me and I lost, it cost me 5 bags. But then you're a student.
Damn.
then you're a student.
Right.
I had 28 bags of coffee. I had 28 students.
Wow.
And these are tough dudes, but they weren't trained.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had formed my own little safety net. And these guys were all from different groups of people. So you had the folk, the Crip, the Bloods, the Muslim Brotherhood, the Israelites, Hebrew Israelites.
Wow.
And because those members were in these different groups, they'd say, don't leave your room today. What? And there's 13 stabbings in a day.
Wow.
But I'm just told by my guys, hey, stay home.
What was it like when you were getting out? How had you changed in those 10 years?
Not for the better. It's not.
Really?
Yeah, because I think, well, if you put your dog on a chain for a decade,
Mm-hmm.
would you take him to a preschool and let him off the leash?
No.
Yeah, you become so, trust is what you lose because you become exposed to a different way, a flawed way of thinking. Sobriety is about not being dishonest.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't had a drink since 1997, June 3rd, because I never lied to myself about that. I knew if I did that, everything else falls apart.
Right.
It doesn't mean I was sober. It just means I set a rule that I knew I can't go over that bridge, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was for self-preservation. That's it. You stop when you need to, I believe.
Sure.
So when you're around people that don't have that as a goal and you can't leave, you're not going anywhere. You're living with them, and they're doing things that don't match sobriety.
Mm-hmm.
That's a challenge. It's not because of the fact that you want to go do drugs, because that's all around you. And you can see people ruining themselves even in prison. And if your head's on straight, you shake your head, you're like, man, I'm really glad I don't do that anymore. That's not my program. But the other things that aren't drug-related, you're still having conversations with people, and you're going to emulate the people you're around eventually, even if you don't see it.
Right.
Even if it's subconscious in nature. So I think what I lost when I came home was my willingness to negotiate.
With anybody?
At all, ever. Because you're in a situation where if you have a disagreement on any level, it leads to violence.
Right.
And if you show a weakness, you're going to get attacked. So you become inflexible. You set lines of what your safety is based on. And I think when you come home, my family was so tolerant. My wife stayed with me for 10 years when I was in prison. Nobody else did that.
Wow.
Like, there used to be a huge line at the phones when you first get in, right? The people you're in with, there's like 30 people, and they're all fighting for the phones.
Uh-huh.
A year later, there's like 10.
Wow.
And then a year later, there's like 2. And then like in the 3rd or 4th year, nobody's family wants to talk to them anymore. They've already worn out the money, and it's rare for people to be supportive past a few years because that's, not only does the family get tired of hearing about the pain because they can't do anything about it, but the inmate starts to get institutionalized. He doesn't want to talk to people from the outside. He's made his own existence. Right? And when I was, here's the eye opener. When I was in my 5th year, no, I was in my 1st year, I was putting a calendar up in Martin. First week that I was there, I was hanging a calendar. I may have mentioned this to you. And a guy was walking by, and one of the rules is you don't look in other people's rooms because that's their privacy.
Right.
So you're in a room with 60 people, and the only thing you can do respectfully is just walk by and not look in somebody's room, even if they're not doing anything. Give them some space. They're in their house, right? Guy looks in my room, and I'm like, and he goes, "You're putting a calendar up." And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "How much time do you have left?" I said, "I'm doing 10." He goes, "Don't put it up until you have 2 years left to go." So I took a calendar and put it back in my locker and was like, I have to wait 8 years before I even start checking the date. That was really an eye-opener. 'Cause that's, to me, that's when it really hit. It was like, don't even check the month.
Right.
Because you're doing so much time. And that was a great advice, because what was I going to do, start checking off the date for 8 years and still 2 left? The hardest part about it probably was the last year.
Really?
Because the last year you could say, okay, now it's getting closer, and it's not. And that's when people screw up. That's when you catch more time. You lose your gain time because you start getting agitated. You start getting, you start
antsy. Like you're like, what's up? What's up?
Yeah, antsy's the word. And then other people are jealous because you start saying, I'm going home.
Right. You
start showing excitement and happiness, and they can't have that.
Right.
And so there's a huge resentment. This guy I was doing time with, he got his neck cut from ear to ear because he had a gold necklace on. He was leaving in 3 days. Wore jewelry in prison. Guy walked up, said, "Give me your necklace. You're going home." No. Died right there.
Wow.
And this was a common occurrence at Martin. I mean, the trauma hawks are there every week. And so for me to go through navigate. I mean, one of the things that saved me in prison is that they made me the head of the library. And so that's where all the drug dealing's done. That's where all the business dealing's done. It's air conditioning.
Oh,
there's a couple
nice.
buildings, right?
That's
so I'm
nice.
working in an air conditioning setting. There's only 2 buildings on the compound that inmates have access to, the medical and the library. So there's a huge line to get in the library in the middle of summer, right? And I would greet everybody as Mr. How are you doing, Mr. Johnson? Because the name tags were, the IDs were on,
Right.
and they weren't used to being talked to with respect ever. One guy stopped and said, why do you greet me every day? I said, because you deserve it. Big dude, doing life, and probably didn't like people that look like me.
Right.
Because I look like the people that put people in jail. I look like the judge. I look like the state attorney. I look like the police officer that arrested you. And for these guys to open up to me, twofold. One, if you're doing life, you might want to learn martial arts. It may come up. You might not. You might have fighting skills and just dismiss that it's real at all. That's part of it. For some guys, it was just something to do.
Right.
And the other was I wrote legal work at a level that very few people could actually do. Because I believed that there were a lot of people that I had met that weren't guilty of the crime. They were just in the neighborhood and fit the all points bulletin.
Description.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it was like, hey.
Do you think it'd be better to give people like a little bit of time? Like if somebody came and it's their first time, I go, do a week at Martin CI. You're fucking scared. You're not used to it. You don't get that time to get used to it. So now it's still scary. You go there for 5 years, you figure out you can survive there. Maybe it's not such a deterrent the next time.
Let's say it is a deterrent. Let's say the deterrent's there. It is the fact that you now have changed the way you interact with the public you're around. And now they're asking you to get out and in 1 week, change it all back. That's what work release is about. Work release is about getting people integrated back. I had a wife and kids.
They don't do shit to integrate people back. When I meet my homeless individuals who are just getting released from prison and they're everywhere,
they get a
I have
bus ticket.
So many of them. They haven't been taught a fucking thing. They haven't been taught how to use a computer, how to use a cell phone, how to do a job interview, how to dress, how to talk, how to do anything.
That is how to dress, not to talk. The job interview is that. So if there was a second meeting we'd have, it would be how do we fix things? We could talk for hours about how things are broken, but what are the steps from somebody who's been in to say, hey, how do you fix this? One, yes, they should know. And then two, once you do send them, you don't get them back.
What do you mean?
Once you send somebody,
the inmates?
Yeah, because how do you integrate them back? You ask them to
you
change
and they have
them.
these reentry services, but they're
not funded.
They're not funded very well. No, and they don't. You need so much support if you're going into prison already developmentally delayed, like we were talking about. Most of my clients have developmental delays.
Nutritional issues, neurological issues, right?
Traumatic brain injuries and all stuff, right? And it's very hard. And to come back out to a family who might be involved in the same lifestyle that got you arrested to begin with no money.
That's environmental. But the other part is if you do go to work release, they take half your money.
I heard that.
They charge you like 70% for the bed, and you're not leaving with money.
Wow.
So you come home broke.
Right.
And then the only skills that you may have honed are learning from other people where you were.
Right. Yeah.
That's not good. So the way to change the system is education.
Right.
Education of the people that are already in the system, and find out how to integrate them with the new education and new hope. Right.
Yeah. Well, maybe come back on again. We could talk about, ways to make it a little bit better. I just can't believe, this guy, his name's Seth Graves. He's going to be coming on in like a week or so. For him, he was in and out of prison a lot in Texas. And he says that one of the things, there's a lot of little things that help us get sober. But one of the things was he was walking to Chow and he was looking out at the bars and he goes, what's over there? Like that air condition, right? And they're like,
rehab.
No, they were like, oh no, that's medical. Like them people are dying. And all he could see with this vision of him, like there. Yeah, I got to spend time with them. I got to spend time. I pushed the and he was like,
wheelchairs.
"Fuck that! Like this is oh my god! I don't want to be there." And like it sounds stupid, but probably when you're in prison, you're like, "Dude, that's gonna be me." Like in medical, dying in prison.
People are dying in your dorm when you're there because Florida medical doesn't really exist. So you pass away right there in your bunk.
How many people do you think passed away when you were there?
I was at Martin for 8 years, so you probably figure there's probably over 100 people that passed from natural causes of old age.
Wow.
I had a hernia operation from being stabbed in the bladder, and they had to put a mesh in to keep my bladder together. Nothing major compared to other people's injuries. And I had to stay in the medical ward in South Florida Regional, and there were people that were going to die right there.
What do they do with the people that have Alzheimer's and stuff? Why keep them in there? Or do they not?
They're right at Florida Medical, right at the regional facility. Lake Butler's the hospital, and Florida Regional has a medical center that it's just a dorm for medical people. They don't get any more care.
Wow.
It's crazy.
So you don't even know that you committed a crime because you have dementia.
You're not, but they do have, they're older facilities. So once you're over a certain age, so maybe you're over 65, you can go, if you don't have these ultra-violent crimes, they can be with each other. But it's nice having the time to talk to you.
Yes, Doug. Thanks for coming to hang out. It was so fun. I hope you all enjoy. I love listening to your stories. So you'll have to come back and tell some more because I'm popping over there. If you guys ever get a minute, this kid had a phone inside of Martin CI and he took a bunch of videos and it's like a little documentary and it's really serious. You guys should check it out. It's a good watch and be like, damn, you lived there for 8 years. Doesn't matter. A year, a day. Doug, thank you so much. Everybody, I hope you have a really happy Halloween and that you have fun and happy November. Look at me in a hoodie in Florida. It's like not really that cold outside, but we're making it work.
Good faking it.
Yeah. And I hope you all have a good week. Love you so much. Bye.
Bye.